Well, we'll go ahead and get started so we can try to get done on time. Um, if they join us, we'll try to catch them up to speed. Um, okay, so looks like everyone's already done it, but just had a few reminders here at the beginning. If I don't know hopefully this will be the last time we have to do a virtual meeting, but if we have to do more, um, then we just have a few kind of ground rules to try to make it. And I think we're all pretty good at Zoom at this point, or Google Meet. But just want to make sure we have some procedures to follow. So first off, logging in with your name, so we know who everyone is. Uh, Looks like everyone I see on the screen has already done that. Hopefully, I have because mine just says you, so I don't know. The on anytime we're doing these virtual meetings, if you can be in a quiet place, just to cut down on background noise, that's helpful. Also, muting your microphone when you're not talking is helpful because sometimes you get a feedback loop, and if you're wearing headphones like I am, I think it destroys some of your hearing capacity. Um, then also, um, there are two links for the emails, so make sure. I think everyone here is on the um, participant link. But if you ever have an issue, it might be because you signed in with the wrong link. One is just to observe, one's for the public, and the other one is for the committee members. So if you have any issues tech wise with anything at any time, you need us to stop, just tell us. We can pause until we resolve it. Um, but so far, so good. Everybody's okay. Also, you'll notice on the bottom of your screen, there's a little hand. Since there's so many of us, if you want to make a specific comment or interject something, and not everybody is on my screen at the same time, uh, hit the raise hand button, and I'll show you what it does. And it lets you um, lets everyone else know that, hey, I want to contribute, and allows us to keep things a little bit more orderly. Um, that's all I have for initial discussion items. Anybody got any questions or anything before we get started? Oh, I do have. Is Taylor here?
Yes.
I am.
All right. Taylor wasn't at our last meeting. He's our SFA student representative. So if you want to take a minute and introduce yourself to everybody, that'd be great.
Yeah, sure. My name is Taylor Talavera. I'm born and raised here. I was born and raised here in Nacogdoches. I'm 22 years old. I just recently graduated from the SFA School of Social Work, and I'm actively pursuing a master's degree, and I plan to have that next year, next May. So I'm excited to join y'all. I spoke to Mr. Mario yesterday. I learned a little bit about what y'all are doing. I've previously worked. I recognize some faces. I worked on with Better Together. I don't know if any of y'all are familiar with that, but that's where I was for the last 6 months, and then I graduated, and now I was presented with this opportunity. So I'm excited to work with y'all and just learn.
Thank you, Taylor. I appreciate you being involved and volunteering to do this. And it's good to have some student perspective on the process. And uh, the so our meeting is is being called to order. It looks like we added another one, but we still may be missing a couple. But we'll go ahead and start. You'll note on the agenda the number two is where we are. We're going to present and discuss regarding different elements and themes in the current 2003 comprehensive plan. Um, and specifically, it's going to be looking at the goals and objectives in the different chapters of the 2003 comprehensive plan. And Elaine is putting up a PowerPoint. Since we couldn't be in person and have a whiteboard or anything, this will allow us to kind of keep everything up in front of us during the discussion. If um, if there's any anything anybody wants to stop on, again, you can raise your hand or just speak up. And hopefully this will be a back and forth discussion on these issues. So we're ready to go ahead and jump into it. All right. So from the the we did a little bit of looking at the existing comprehensive plan last time, and I know everybody's homework was to read it. And the one of the things you would have noticed is it is broken out into sections based on different topics. One of the first ones, and maybe the first one, is the environment and natural resources. So listed here are some objectives that, or I guess these are the goals that were listed in that section. First one, conservation and protection of valued environmental resources. The second is development that is compatible with the natural environment. Third, creeks and floodplain that is managed in an environmentally sound manner, ensuring continued use for floodplain management, wildlife habitat, and recreation. Number 4 is preservation of scenic beauty and natural habitat. And then 5 is excellent water quality. So those were the overarching goals from the environment and natural resources section. As y'all were reading through that section, I'd like to get some feedback. Any of those goals that appear to you to be goals we'd want to carry ahead to the new comprehensive plan with regard to the environment? Yeah, go ahead, Kurt.
Okay, so can you hear me okay, Ken?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. All right, what I my comment on that on the environment and natural resources section is I mean I understand the elements as presented, but one question I had is so there it seems like there may be other considerations to add to that, things like livestock or timber, things that actually are part of the development of the local economy. Seems like those should at least be considered. For example, I don't see poultry or cattle. I don't see that listed. I don't see timber listed, but those are big agricultural aspects of our local economy. Of course, that branches out more into the county as opposed to the city. But I was just curious if the fact that those are, I think, part of our at least county economy. It seems like they would be at least considered in a comprehensive plan or acknowledged as something that contributes to the viability of the community, which is obviously the hub of the county is Nacogdoches. So
Yeah, that's actually a good point, because a lot of the even though you're right, like the timber, typically you're not cutting it in town to sell, or there's not, I mean, there may be a chicken house or two inside the city limits, but probably not the most productive one. But it's kind of interesting because all the well, not all, but a lot of the follow-on work on those raw materials or the chicken is actually done in town. And so I think that it's hard to separate the two. You've got Pilgrim's Pride over on University, you've got Norboard and some of the other plants that are within the city where they're receiving huge shipments of timber daily. So it's all related, yeah. And I guess the question would be, how do you how do you account for that interface between, our local industry, some of which is happening in the county, and the businesses that are getting shipped that product to turn it into something to sell?
Of course, I don't necessarily have the answer to that question.
Oh, you don't?
The I guess my reason for mentioning that is, for example, say say there was another opportunity for another chicken processor, poultry processor, wanted to locate, was considering locating in city, inside the city limits of Nacogdoches. I don't think that's necessarily likely, but I just think that maybe a comprehensive plan should at least contemplate the local economy and speak to that in some form.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead, Sydney.
Yeah, Kurt, that actually kind of brought sort of a more general question I have that I've been thinking about as I was going through a lot of this, because we do tend to kind of separate, the city and the county. But even when we were talking about the fact that our population numbers don't seem to be growing, that I doubt seriously that is necessarily the case when you include everybody in the county. And like we said at our last meeting, those people don't stay. 90% of the people that are out here in Cushing, where I'm at, don't stay here in Cushing. Like, we go to town all day, every day, unless we're home. And so there are a lot of these things, I think, that, if there are things that we can do that will help maybe increase some of those chicken houses out here in the county, or people coming out here to hunt, or I think there's a lot of things that maybe we could, if we were doing that's encouraging in the county, that's bringing people more into town, into our area, and they will be coming into the city to actually shop and eat and do all of those things.
Yes, Elena.
No, I just want to say those are great questions, and I think that might fall under land use, the land use chapter, because the land use chapter does talk about economic development and promoting economic development for specific types of commercial, industrial, retail, and so that could include our agricultural economic market, and then making sure that we are accommodating the agricultural land use to make sure that we're maintaining a certain percentage of land that's reserved or preserved for kind of the agricultural livestock use. So I just wanted to mention that.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, the and another issue is a lot of if you're thinking about the issue of for example, bringing in another chicken plant or another Norboard type facility in, there's a whole question of, well, what kind of impact does that have on the local or I guess in that area, the water system, the utilities there, traffic. Is there environmental concerns if it's going to be next to Lenana Creek or Bonita Creek? A lot of the environmental concerns are going to be, I think, as far as development goes, there's going to be some high level federal and state requirements that have to be met for any sizable new facility. But, we should still have some policies, I think, that look to do the development responsibly on a city level, or encourage development where we'd rather have it, and that is more compatible with what we want in the area. But one of the things I saw on here, it doesn't specifically mention it. It talks about preservation of scenic beauty and natural habitat. I would imagine since 2003, there's been a lot of effort on that side with local parks and the Lenana Creek Trail, Bonita Creek Trail, which have been greatly expanded. And I know the park system has been expanded. Is that something that does anybody feel strongly about having more of a focus on how to bring more outdoor activities into, or at least have a plan to develop more outdoor activities to for residents of the city? Is that something we think we should have as a goal going forward? Hey, Ed, go ahead.
Hey, Ken, thank you. I talked to a lot of people that are anticipating a move to Nacogdoches, and without a doubt, almost all of them make the same comment that the resources that we have available to them through our park system, trail system, and all that is very important to them. Outdoor living, outdoor activity. I mean, let's get real. That's why they come here. And so I think it's important that we make a nod to that. One thing that I'm a little worried about, and I guess it's, the comment that was made earlier about economic development, industrial development, that sort of thing. I would be very cautious about pre-legislating those items, because decisions that we may make today may not be the right decisions 10 years from now. And so I think it would be nice to keep that part of it a bit vague, just get a general overall feel of how we feel as a committee and a community, but not define that too much. That worries me. But the park system, the trail system, all the outdoor activities that we work on are extremely important. And I'm telling you, people looking at Nacogdoches key on that very much.
Thanks. It's good to hear feedback about that, because I know it's something that I considered when we moved here, and I've used a lot the trail system, and so I feel like it's important, but you just never know if it's something that everyone agrees with.
Yeah, really, I've never had anyone say, oh, I mean, they always very important.
And before we move on, I noticed that there is a unknown person on the list, and I just want to make sure we knew who that was. Let's see. Is there a way? I don't have any way to like ping that specific person, do I, Elena, so they know that they're showing up as unknown? Can't unmute them, so I can't. Anyway, if you talk, we'll let you know who's showing up as unknown. Everyone else seems to have their name in there. So the another thing here, we do have a lot of floodplain in town, especially along University Drive, and I know when we've had hurricanes, tropical storms in the past, you've seen those parking lots at SFA look like a pond, and some of the areas on Pearl Street flood. So some good questions there that how do we account for development or use of that area? What's a good use of that area? If you can't build there, what can you do with it? And are we underutilizing those areas? Any thoughts on that?
You have people raising their hand.
Go ahead, Paul. Oh, Brad, you're the unknown person. Now you're known.
How do I fix that?
I'm not sure.
Okay.
Let's see. Maybe under the three dots, you might be able to Well, I don't know. No, maybe not. Well, it's okay. We know who you are now. Process of elimination. So Paul Jackson, I saw your hands up. You can go ahead and speak to that. Make sure you're unmuted. I don't know if you're muted or not. Hey, Paul.
Ken, he would have to
Mhm.
leave and rejoin, but it's Brad, so I think he'll be fine.
Yeah, it's fine. Paul, for some reason, we're not able to hear you. If you want, is that you, Paul? Well, if you want to troubleshoot that, I'll let Denise go ahead while we're waiting on you to get your mic working.
Can I let Nicole had her hand up before me?
Oh, she did? Okay.
Can we let her talk first?
Yeah, sure. Go ahead, Nicole.
Yeah, I was just going to speak to the parks. I know a lot of people in the community do like going to the parks. And I know a big thing is they want parks to where, anyone in any age group can play. So like a mom with a toddler, and maybe a 12-year-old can go to the same park and both have something to do. And I know it's a big deal with a lot of people trying to find a park to go to that, one kid won't be bored at while the other one's having fun.
Yeah, I would say parks have been one of the areas I think we've made a lot of improvements on in the past 10 years. Just I have young kids, and we first moved here, started going to some of the parks, and it was kind of depressing sometimes with the amount of activities there were. And the new facilities have been great, but I do think there is something there because it's hard sometimes if it's just a park for little kids. How do you entertain the older? Um, and and I'm I'm a big believer in parks. I like having parks. I think that it's nice to have green space in the city for sure. Um, is there a Nicole? Have your parks advocacy lead, right? That's your background.
Right. Yeah.
Um, I know we did a parks master plan recently. What was one of the big issues or goals that you saw from that plan, that is something you think we need to work on, or maybe that we should bring over to as a goal for the comprehensive plan?
Well, no, from the Parks Master Plan, I think a lot of the results that came out of it was they were wanting to beef up the sports complexes and maybe bring in more tournament teams to bring revenue to Nacogdoches. Because I know, like Monroe has a big park, and a lot of tournament teams go there to play, travel ball. But I know it would just like more parks in general that blend in with the natural surroundings. I know the splash pad at Moroni is a big hit. And I know a lot of people would like, bigger water parks like that to go and play at in the summer when it's
Hmm.
nice, steamy, 100 degrees outside.
Yeah, and oh, who was that? Sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. It's Mabel
Oh,
Canning.
go ahead.
Nicole, I had kind of an observation as well. There's, as I see it, a great disparity in the look and the feel, the amenities, the equipment, the green space around parks in some of the communities, like on the east side, and it's pretty depressing. The little Timpson Park, some of it is just a slab with a fence around it. Then you come to other areas and you contrast that, and there's a huge difference in the look and the feel and the what's put into the park. So I think there needs to be more intentionality about the placement of parks and, you know, the amenity, the aesthetics of the parks and how we equip them and, you know, who our target audience is for these parks. Because like that little temple park, you know, it's tiny, you know, there's some water coming out of there, but clearly there needs to be more attention to parks in the areas like on the east side of town.
Yeah, and I know the city and the group I'm in, Parks Advocacy League, we are working on upgrading Woden Road Park. McCrimmon Park is what the sign says. We've painted the basketball court, and we're currently, or my group's raising money to get better playground equipment on that side of town as well. So the city's knows about it, and I know Pioneer Park, that was updated a few years ago, where the old tank is.
Yeah,
It's a really nice park now.
The there's there's also a whole chapter on parks and rec, and since we've kind of moved over into that discussion, maybe it'd be good to move ahead and look at those goals while we're talking, and knock that one out at the same time.
Yeah, sure. And so we have 2 slides. This is the first slide, and then there's a second slide. And the 2017 update to the Parks and Recreation Master Plan, though the same goals are reflected here. So the goals that you see here on these slides, those are the same ones that are in the 2017. And so these are the first 4, and then we put the rest of them on the second slide. So Ken, yeah, do you want to just go through those real quick? Or not real quick, but go through those.
Muted, sorry. So the goals on here, wide range of parks and rec facilities that will accommodate the current and future needs of the city's residents and visitors. A parks, recreation, open space system that is maintained, enhanced, and operated in a cost-effective manner. Cooperative agreements and coordinated efforts with other governmental jurisdictions, school districts, and private sector entities. Appropriate outdoor recreation facilities. And then is it just conserving natural resources, or did I miss something? Something get cut off.
There's 3 bullet points on
Okay.
this slide.
Natural resources and open spaces that are conserved through park and recreation land acquisition, open space preservation, and environmentally sensitive planning, and a pedestrian and bicycle network of sidewalks, trails, and bikeways, which connects residential areas to parks, schools, workplaces, shopping, major open spaces, and other destinations, providing alternative routes for circulation. Can you go back to the last page real quick, Elena? One of those things, the third one down there, cooperative agreements and coordinated efforts with other governmental jurisdictions, school districts, and private sector entities. Does anybody know what that means? Because I don't. Was anyone involved in that one? That could
I
translate
actually remember
us?
that.
Yeah.
That was geared towards getting agreements with the school districts to allow their playgrounds to be open, and not just open, but to be very publicly open for public use, so that you could go to, Regay Elementary's playground, if that is the closest playground to you. I will tell you, at the time, and it has been many years since that was discussed, the NISD administration at the time wasn't super excited about that for liability reasons, but that doesn't mean it isn't a wonderful idea and shouldn't be brought back up, because that was 20 years ago. So
Okay. I see we've got some people with their hands raised. Denise, I had you before. Did you want to jump in now?
Do you want me to? Because
Sure.
I think we went forward and then we went back.
Yeah.
I think what I was going to talk about was the floodplains, and
Oh, sure. Yeah.
so in the land use portion, I think that's the name of the chapter. In this last one, the comprehensive plan, they talked about protecting the 100-year floodplain from further urban encroachment whenever possible. And I don't think we've done that. And I think it's a really good thing to maybe keep in there. I think not only for the fact that it's going to flood, we hope only every 100 years, but also because it's usually right there on some of these beautiful trails and near the parks and that sort of thing. So I would like to see that stay.
Okay, great.
And enforced. I mean, if we can do it.
Yeah. Well, I know development in the floodplain is difficult to do, or maybe impossible in certain situations. And I think Elena could speak to that more intelligently than I could, but yeah, there is still some issue with existing structures, existing neighborhoods that were built inside the floodplain, parts of the university. So, and some of those things are not going to be moved probably, or at least for a long time. So, some questions there. But Elena, could you talk about new development inside the floodplain, the 100-year floodplain?
Yeah, sure. And Steve Bartlett, our city engineer, is also on the call. Steve, if you want to jump in.
Yeah.
That's fine.
Sorry, Steve, I forgot you were on here.
Yeah, no. Steve, do you want me to handle it or you want to jump in? All right, so yes, so we have the floodplain, 100-year floodplain, which are areas that are anticipated to flood every 100 years. And those areas are designated by FEMA. And then we have the floodway, which is the actual waterway. And we don't allow any development in the floodway. We do allow limited development in the floodplain, but there are additional restrictions and limits on that. We do require engineered plans. You do have to raise your building above the base flood elevation area. So we do allow some development in the floodplain, but it is limited. And like one of the committee members mentioned earlier, there's a lot of existing development in the floodplain because some of these areas weren't studied back in the 60s or 70s, whenever a lot of our city was built. And so those are grandfathered in, but so there's limits on those as well as far as redevelopment and things like that. Steve, did I miss anything?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I think I kind of kicked it off there and I couldn't get it back on. Apologize. No, what you said is absolutely correct. What you've got to remember is balancing this. The vast majority of your commercial development along University Drive, and that includes parts on the east side of University Drive as well, are in the floodplain. So we have treated the floodplain as a developable area with permits and observations on how they built and how high they built, like Elena said. If we eliminated building in the floodplain, you live in a town that was built along two creeks. And so it would destroy a significant part of our commercial development or keep it from redeveloping. So there's got to be some balance to all that. And some buffering on the creeks is certainly warranted. But a no build in the floodplain would pretty well paralyze us from a business and economic development standpoint.
Thank you, Steve. And Mabel, you had your hand up. You're the first one. If you'd like to jump in.
No, I think I made my point about being intentional in these plans, that we do not continue to neglect sections of our city and go on and focus on the broader community and not give some thought and some budget. You know, I asked Elena, I said, I want to see the tier 2 projects that are planned and the budgets that are being planned to go along with that. And I'd like to see that by zip code. And I maintain that if we do not set forth an intention to do anything different, we'll never do anything different. And that is what the plan is for. It's so that we can recognize that there are disparities and reallocate some funds to correct those disparities. And I don't want to sound like a broken record, but I do want to be understood that we can no longer just have pretty language about what we're going to do. There must be a specific plan that says, okay, let's address parks in the east side of town, for example, and let's do something about it.
Yeah. And Elena, can you go to the second page of the Parks and Rec slides real quick? Yeah. So, and it is noticeably not included. There's nothing on this Parks and Rec goals that says, hey, let's make sure that we're actually providing parks to all neighborhoods or adequate
Yes.
facilities to all neighborhoods. It's just not a goal on
Yes.
here.
Mhm.
So perhaps that's something that needs to be. I agree with you. If it's something that we think is important, we need to just come out and say, hey, this is one of our goals.
Yes.
Otherwise, it gets lost in the mix. Because you could spend a lot of money. I think personally, I have a big love for uh, making things walkable and especially around the downtown area. I think it'd be great if we had more sidewalks, if we had more bike paths, but that's expensive and there's only so much money. And so, if our goals are, you could spend all your money on sidewalks that you have in a park budget or in a
Yeah.
recreation budget and never address some of the historic issues that we have. So I think that is a good point you're making. That and it's noticeably omitted from this list of goals.
Yes.
Kurt, you're the next in line with your hand up. I don't know if you left it up or if you had another comment. Just want to make sure I got to you.
Yeah, thank you, Ken. Well, I was just going to say we kind of bounced around here, so I'll try to stay on task with my thoughts. But we were back over in the environmental and resources section, and we got off on the discussion about parks.
Yeah.
And someone has already reiterated what I was going to say, that there is a section in the 2000 the plan that we're reviewing, that's dedicated to specifically to parks. So that in and of itself, addresses the fact that that's an important issue. And I agree. I think it's appropriate to have that section in there. Certainly, at some point in time, it seems like maybe the discussion needs to be focused on strictly that section and take some of these comments under consideration. But then we were talking about the protection of the floodplains and those type of things, and I agree. There's limited ability to develop inside those areas. Some of those areas they make great parks. Again, so much of these desires can be accommodated by funds, and there are funds available to do some of those things. Like you said, Ken, you can't get in a situation where you have to be careful about what are the important aspects of the city budget. I mean, we talked about environment, preserving the environment, which is a noble thing to pursue. Then we talk about parks, but there's certainly a whole other set that I assume we'll get to discussion, and everybody can weigh in on their ideas on those. But at the same time, Steve mentioned a minute ago the idea of if we take natural resources and we view that as a limiting factor, then we feel like we run the risk of killing our town and our community. And so, but because we limit commercial development, and personally, I don't think that's what we want to do. But I do think that we need to, in these discussions, we need to be aware of and cognizant of that balance. There is what is practical for the future of Nacogdoches. And so with that, I'll go ahead and let somebody else have the floor.
Thank you for that, Kurt. James, you had your hand up.
Yes, that's in reference to the parks and the statement Miss Canning made. I certainly feel the same way living on the south side of town. I think that there is a disparity in where parks and maintenance of parks are taken care of in our community. And I would like to see that. I know you saw that thing there that you listed about agreement with the school districts. That I don't know that it's a possibility or that it's not a possibility, but we do have schools throughout the Nacogdoches community, and they have playgrounds. And if there was some way that we could do that, then there would be access to everybody that lives in those neighborhoods. But I don't feel that at this point in time. I mean, we need to start thinking about the whole community, and that's including the east side and the south side, north side, west side. And that's just my thought.
Thank you very much. Sydney?
Sorry, no, we're kind of jumping around. I was going
Yeah.
back to what Kurt and Steve were saying.
Yeah.
I wonder if, because I always think about the way the Woodlands looks, that somehow they've managed to, you can be in the middle of the Woodlands and it feels like you're in the, the middle of the woods, and then there's a Walmart behind somewhere. So I'm just wondering if maybe there's a way we can kind of see what some of their policies are, or like how they got to that point where they seem to be able to have preserved at least some of the resources. Maybe they haven't. Maybe it just looks like they do from the outside, and they've, maybe from an environmental perspective, they've done a terrible job. I don't know. But it seems, at least from what it looks like, that, you are very clear that they are still in piney woods, and they clearly have not slowed down their economic development and commercial development. So I just wonder if maybe there's some way we can kind of see what are some of the ways that they did that.
That's a good point, because there's some, and maybe they had the benefit of developing tracts of land that were undeveloped, but it's a little harder than coming back and redeveloping when people already own things. But it does look intentional, and it looks nice. I agree with you there. Kathleen? Oh, you're muted, Kathleen.
Sorry, that's one of
That's
my
okay.
common errors.
It's okay.
I think everyone's comments are just wonderful. I wanted to add one other perspective, and that's that many of the things we're talking about might serve multiple purposes. So, for example, I actually believe that I'm very supportive of preserving, all of our natural resources. That's one of the reasons we chose Nacogdoches. Our parks, also making sure we preserve even the fish and the creeks as healthy creeks. But also at the same time, we might be able to pay more attention to our history, to all the histories of our community. So, for example, we might be able to develop a park at the same time we're celebrating African American history, and develop sites within the park that people could understand about our history. So that's just one thing. I think we can serve multiple purposes in one particular area. And I believe our parks, we need more recreation in some of our underserved areas, but we also need more history to celebrate. And so that's my 2 cents.
Thank you. I was muted too. Since we have some other sections to go to, I think this discussion has been really good, and maybe we come back in the future, because at the end of our discussion today, we're going to have a survey that everyone can come back and say, here's what we think are the most, and we may not even get to all of the points that each of you think is really important to address as far as goals moving forward for what we want to embody in these different areas of a comprehensive plan. And so we want to give everyone opportunity to identify those goals that are important. And if there's areas we need to do more discussion in the future, that'll give us an opportunity at future meetings to maybe focus in on some of these areas, if it's parks or natural resources or one of the other areas we're about to talk about. But in the interest of time, I think we'll move back to the second section. Elena, if you could get us back to, I think it's land use. Yeah. Okay. So we'll just read through these real quick. I know y'all can read, but it might be helpful just to quickly go through this, especially if anybody's on their phone. Long-term growth in appropriate areas to achieve an efficient, diverse, and balanced pattern of land uses, both within the city and urbanizing portions of the extraterritorial jurisdiction, which is that area just outside the city limits. A variety of safe, high-quality residential areas that meet the needs of Nacogdoches residents. Vibrant and viable commercial and industrial areas, supported by a quality community offering many assets and opportunities for economic development, and high quality development that respects community character and the natural environment and does not overburden public services and infrastructure. So there's just one slide on that, right? Yeah. So looking at that, land use is kind of a big deal. I know being on planning and zoning, we've heard a lot of concerns about density and what kind of developments go in which neighborhoods and how to plan for those things. And this is what we're talking about here, is a higher level view of how do we plan for different with existing neighborhoods, putting new neighborhoods, new developments in, and also doing it in a way that basically respects what the community currently has and not overburdening our fire, police, water system, things like that. So any thought? I think everybody might have some thoughts on land use. So just want to kind of open it up for any comments on these goals. Which of these goals you think are important, or which goals we should be including here that we're not? And I'll ask a pointed question. When and where should we allow high density development? Go ahead, Kurt.
Okay, thanks, Ken. So I'm going to go ahead and just throw this out there that I just think quite candidly and frankly that the community of Nacogdoches, at least the people that I talk to and hear from on a regular basis, I don't think the community embraces the idea of high density housing, high density populations. I think the attractive thing that Nacogdoches has to offer is just the opposite of that. I think people come to Nacogdoches because they want to be spread out. They want to have a yard. They want to have a neighborhood with single family homes, and so I think the idea of establishing a priority for the community to promote and develop high density population housing, I think is dangerous to the Nacogdoches community.
Yeah, and I understand that. You're right. We're more of a rural setting, even though we're kind of unique because of the university and some other factors here that kind of make it a little bit more urban in some areas. But historically, I think most of the development has been single family homes or smaller apartment buildings. But there is some place for high density. I mean, there's student housing, there's existing apartments in town, and if the price of houses keep going up because Ed keeps doing his job too well, then no one's gonna be able to afford a house. So what do we do? How do we get people here to work jobs that we need them to, or how do we have affordable single family housing? Is that something that can be done? Um, is that something that can be done from a land use plan perspective, or are we at the whims of the economy? I'm not sure. Any thoughts on high density developing? Go ahead, Ed. I got you first. Sorry, I didn't
Yeah, no, that's
see you up there.
no. I church comments, but as we grow in industrial development, as we grow as a community and create more jobs, there's going to be a section of the community that wants apartment life. We have very few complexes in town that are non-student, and the ones that are there are the occupancy rates are nearing 100%. The thing that we deal with is that our rental rates are not market. So when a developer comes in to build an apartment complex, they see rental rates that probably don't justify new construction. So, what's happens is then you have, a group that comes in that's been in that does the affordable housing projects, and, here we go. And so you just don't know what the best course of action is for the community, and that needs to be vetted out. But let's take another angle that I think is awfully important. We have a zoning map. That zoning map's been in place for a long time. We don't allow spot zoning. So we already have areas of town that are R4 designation. I think we need to do a comprehensive review of the zoning map to see if anything's different than what we want as a community, because, to figure out where those go, I mean, we've already determined that on our map, but, nobody's reviewed it in quite a while. We do a lot of uh-ohs, and we go back and rezone when things aren't right. But, where is it? Are R4 properties where they need to be? Is it something that we want as the growth of the community? And I think, student housing at this point probably is in pretty good shape. But, as SFA grows, then yeah, that'll make a difference too. We need to look at single family, multifamily housing right now, because I think that's our more immediate need.
Okay. Steele?
Yeah, I wanted to ask a clarifying question. As we've talked about high density development, we didn't really give any parameters for what that means. Is that one apartment complex? Is it more than one? How many units? I was just looking for some clarification.
Yeah, and I think that's an open question, to be honest. I think there's probably a limit. I don't think we're going to get a high rise, in Nacogdoches, but there's probably room for developments that are kind of similar to what's been built recently, which I think is mainly student housing, but like the lofts, or is it the Legend, the one on North Street where the Hyder house is? So, I would think that would probably be the upper limit, but I don't know. This is maybe a question for a realtor more than, what are people looking for? What's the market for multifamily development right now? Is it a townhouse, or is it a planned development community that has, somebody brought this up the other day at the planning and zoning meeting. Austin did that development at the old airport there, the Mueller development, which has both single family houses and townhouses, and I think some apartments. And then it also has some kind of mixed use retail, things like that. Now, much different city, but on a smaller scale. Is that something that other towns of our size or slightly larger are doing? I don't know. Or is it just, hey, we're just going to come in and build our cookie cutter apartment complex? Ed, can you speak to that as far as the development side?
Yeah, I mean, this is just clearly my opinion, which may not be worth anything, but to redefine still what I think Nacogdoches needs right now is we need a complex very similar to University Hill and probably about the same size, because we need a variety of 1, 2, and 3 bedroom options. And that one has that. And there are some amenities that go with that, and it looks good and it's gated. It has all the things that people are looking for, and it's non-student. So I guess conceptually look at that. Right now, our need is for a complex very similar to that, that has that variety. And, you know, where it sits in town, you know, that's up to, I guess, the city and our zoning projects. But anyway, that would be our immediate need, and then down the road, then we look at something else. But that's been a very good complex for us. A lot of professionals end up there as they're transitioning to home ownership, and so anyway, that would be my comment.
Okay, Brad, go ahead.
Yeah. Well, obviously, I try to figure out what my lane is, and my lane is trying to preserve the historic areas in our town, and I think it's dangerous to start top-down government kind of proposals where you're saying, well, let's move this apartment into this area, even though this area is historic or this area is single-family homes. I think it's a very dangerous precedent, because when you have a government using tax credits and things to do that, you end up driving those residents out of the city, which I think you've seen in Central Heights and several different places. A lot of the people, I don't know on this committee, but a lot of the people that work for the government that enforce the rules and tax the citizens of Nacogdoches live in Douglas and Chirino and outlying cities. And they don't actually, they don't walk the walk. They're not taxed the same way, even though they get to make the decisions. So that's the kind of thing that concerns me, is designating these places and then using the city's sort of heavy hand to build apartments that maybe the people in that neighborhood, they're not, I think you're wrong in saying they're racist or NIMBYs or whatever. There are people that live in a certain neighborhood, like the last land and planning zone battle that you guys had on Harrison Burke. Those were just neighbors, and they wanted to preserve their neighborhood. And I think we get off step a little bit there.
And just to clarify, I never said anybody was racist personally. I don't think.
No, I know. I'm not
Just
accusing
making
you.
sure.
I'm not accusing anybody
Yeah.
on this panel, but you hear talk around town and people comment on Facebook and they're saying, well, you just don't want that because you don't want it in your backyard. But you're out in Douglas telling us where to put it, So that's, it's a little honest on my part, but it's me.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. And I think part of, if you look at, I think this is where goals sometimes, in the desire to be inclusive and say, okay, well, this describes multiple different things we're concerned about. They sometimes fail because, if you look at this fourth one here, it says high quality development that respects community character. I assume that in the discussion process for that gobbled up historic neighborhoods and making sure that things are compatible with the surrounding community, but it doesn't really. It's stated in a way that's kind of vague and non-committal. So it's not clear that that's really a priority or not. So maybe that's one of the things we need to do on these goals. If we feel strongly about protecting historic neighborhoods, for example, maybe we need to just come out and say that as one of the goals. And by trying to be maybe we're trying to be too cute by being too inclusive on some of these current goals that are in the comprehensive plan. Go ahead, Brad.
And actually, your historic neighborhoods are some of the most inclusive, most diverse neighborhoods in Nacogdoches. It tends to be the more wealthy neighborhoods on the edges of town that are more exclusive. So I think they put historic as being some kind of protective people, when in reality it's everybody. That we're the whole palette of Nacogdoches. I mean, I think Ed was right. I think we need to look at our zoning, but not look at it to water it down, but to clarify it and to say this is a neighborhood. Stop the dissolution of that neighborhood, and find out where we live and where we want to live, because otherwise you start mixing and matching and everybody moves out of town. Their single family homes are all out in the country, and the more, in tribes of people, the closer people get to each other, the more strife and conflict there is. And Nacogdoches has been conflict free in a lot of ways for a long time, and I think we're headed in the wrong direction in that way. Trying to push people together.
And so sounds to me like maybe one of our goals on land use should be either a routine, like every so many years we do some sort of go through actual process where we reassess our zoning ordinances and because it is a mishmash, believe me. I mean, people come in all the time and they're like, for some reason my house is in a B2 zoning and I don't know why, and they want to change it. And so I know there's legal impediments to doing full scale rezoning, but perhaps that should be a goal, is reassessment and an assessment of current zoning on a regular basis, so that we can make sure that things still reflect what we thought they were in the 70s, 80s, or 90s when the zoning was put into place. So, Larry, I saw your hand was up.
Yes, I was just going to make a point. The sort of introductory section on page 5.2 into this, there was a point there on building neighborhoods, which I think is very important, that we need to maintain and maybe enhance. I didn't really see that carried out, though, in this section, even though that was in the introductions. I didn't see it carried out as strongly in the goals and the objectives and the actions as it was in the introduction. Some of it is over in chapter 8, but I think even in chapter 8, some of that got lost. So I would just like to say that, I think that we need to emphasize that. I think that's an important part of our community and has always been an important part of our community. Neighborhoods and maintaining the integrity of those neighborhoods and the character of those neighborhoods, I think is very important.
Okay, thank you. And Kathleen, I saw your hand was up as well.
Okay. Took me a while to get off mute. I support both what everybody has been saying. I think Larry summarized it, that we have to protect the integrity of neighborhoods. Maybe we can actually have a goal, as you suggested, Ken, of preserving neighborhoods, preserving and protecting neighborhoods. Add that one, and then add an additional goal of preserving and protecting historic neighborhoods. And I loved what Ed said, and I'd like to get it specified about reviewing legacy zoning, because we have had spot zoning. And that's really partially because of the legacy zoning being misinterpreted as something that we need to have. I hope I didn't kick Ed Poole out of the meeting by supporting him, but because he just left.
He just
But
sent me
anyway,
a message and said he had to jump off to another meeting.
I know, I'm sure. But I do think that reviewing legacy zoning is critical. And that probably isn't a goal, but it's an action step in both preserving historic neighborhoods and preserving our regular neighborhoods. So those are really three very specific comments. And I think Larry has his hand up about that too, or
Okay.
something.
Yeah, Larry just put his hand up. Go ahead, Larry.
Yes, I was going to say, which I didn't say earlier, that I was pleased when I read through the old plan. I thought it was a very good plan. I thought there were a lot of great things in it, many of which didn't get implemented for one reason or the other. And I think there's a lot of valuable stuff here that we don't need to ignore and we need to maintain and keep on the agenda.
Thank you. And I think land use is something we're going to have to come back to probably more in depth because it is kind of the 800-pound gorilla in the plan. I'm sure comments that we get, written comments afterward, will probably reflect that. But I do want to move on so we're not so we can hit some of the other areas. Kathleen, though, go ahead, and I saw you put your hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that throughout this plan, I think we need to keep almost all the goals that we had before. Maybe we should be saying which one of these do we not want to keep, and same with some of the action steps. But so I'm just supporting what Larry just said.
I agree. Some of my concern, I'll be honest with you, especially in this land use section, is maybe the goals are too vague or too aspirational and not specific enough. So maybe it's hard to disagree with the way that the goals are written, but it's like, what is it telling me is really important? Or how do you use this goal to weigh against different options?
Or how do you put teeth in it?
Right. Yeah. Go ahead, Steele.
I just want to reiterate exactly what y'all both just said, that it'd be nice if they were actionable, a little bit more action to them.
Mm-hmm. And Kurt, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Ken. One of the things that I'll agree that I think that this current plan that we're doing, I think there's more of it that I like and I embrace than there is that I dislike. So, I'm hearing that from it seems to be a consensus that's becoming apparent here. One thing that I'll touch on what Steele just said. I had made a comment on my notes, and I said this plan has too much shotgun blast. And what I mean by that is you go through these sections, and there's these objectives have 8 or 10, or sometimes maybe 20 or so bullet points, and I think there's been questions that have been raised about specific bullet points. What does that mean, and so forth and so on. And I have this. I'm curious as well, but I almost wish that this plan had an index, and each one of these bullet points had a number where we could reference them specifically. But that's just an idea. Possibly with reviewing this plan, that could possibly take a lot of time to do. But at some point, 20 years from now, when there's a group of people that come after us or reviewing what the result of our process, I think if these items were a little more specific and a little more indexed a little bit better, that might make for a little bit easier plan for people to evaluate.
No, I think you're right, because one of the things we've discussed, and I think should be a goal probably, is to have periodic review of the comprehensive plan and assess where are we not following it. or where are we missing out on things? And if you just got, like you said, if it's just a shotgun blast of here's 12 objections or objections, got lawyer on the brain, 12 objectives that are under one, bullet point. Well, how do you determine that those are being followed? Which ones are, what's your priority? It it it'll it'll opens the door for inaction in some ways, I think, and that's a concern. Or to go, well, look how nice that is, and just move on and never do anything with it. Jacob, I saw your hand was up.
Yes, sir. I just wanted to mention this, something I noticed looking through land use. I even pulled up the digital version and tried to do a little search. There's no mention of I-69, and I know that's coming, and it's just it's something to think through what our priorities are for that interstate, because it's coming and it has a lot of potential, but just something I wanted to mention there.
Yeah, that's a great point, and it it talks about it in the plan, but very vaguely and very obviously they didn't really know where. They thought it was going to go out by the airport at the time, and so yeah, you're right. It's just not covered in a way that's useful. Go ahead, Kurt.
Yeah, so with regard to I-69, I am aware in one of these, in some of this information that the city provided us, it does talk about that. I think that's one of the tasks of this consultant that may assist with this process. But with that said, I know that in 2003, when this plan was developed, and Larissa pointed this out to us at our last meeting, and Ken, you just mentioned it, the I-69 in this plan was to go out by the airport, and then somewhere along the way, a group of people got together and basically, for whatever reason, determined that they need to be changed. And I'm curious what the thinking was that went into that, because obviously there was a lot of effort put in place to make the decision for the route that was chosen in this plan, and then something happened to that changed that, and so the reality of that is that whether that was a good thing or bad thing, it is what it is. The community now has an ongoing process, a portion of I-69 that's being developed here in town, and that's only going to extend into the future, and it's going to take place in an area that is that wasn't chosen by this plan. And so just the fact that action happened causes me to ask the question, why? And I'm sure there's some people that at the city that could probably speak to that and maybe clarify that. But the other thing there that comes to mind is that I certainly don't profess to be an expert at anything, let alone determining how to lay out an interstate. But I do know that there's you can go online and review specifications for interstates that suggest that in urban areas, I think the exits are limited to a mile apart, and in the rural areas, I think they're more like limited to 5 miles apart. And so I'm assuming that at some point we're going to have that discussion, and what's going to have to happen, I believe, is there's going to be some people over there on the West Loop that are going to find that their businesses have been cut off to the other side of the road, and which that's certainly a cost of progress, but that in and of itself is going to be an interesting discussion on who winds up, who gets to turn out onto the road and who doesn't. There's going to be some strong opinions, I think, that are going to come out of that discussion, and certainly it's our job with this comprehensive plan to address those. So anyhow, I just would say that people may want to begin to give that some thought and formulate their ideas as those conversations happen.
That's a good point. And it may be a good time to kind of segue into the transportation slide while we're talking about it. Uh-oh. Do we lose you, Elena, or you're still there? There you go. But yeah, you make a good point, Kurt. There's going to be a lot of discussion that needs to be made about how people get off the interstate and get into town, and how the businesses that are there and how they're going to be granted access to the interstate, and what we want to do possibly with the land that surrounds it, as far as making it attractive for, do we want to encourage certain types of businesses to come in or not? And so there's a lot that has not been covered, and part of me is glad that that if we go forward through this process, there will be a interstate corridor portion of the plan, because it's just something that hasn't been done at all to this point. But looking at transportation in general, here's the goals here: constant coordination of land use and transportation planning and implementation to ensure viable development outcomes for the long term. I mean, it applies everywhere, but especially applies to the I-69 corridor. A viable, well-used public transit system that meets definite needs, while also providing a practical alternative for various automobile trips in town. Expanded local air transportation options for area residents, businesses, and public agencies. Progress toward being recognized as a pedestrian bicycle friendly community, in a community that shows particular concern for accessibility for all persons, and a balance of new construction with steady maintenance of transportation facilities to address current deficiencies, as well as future mobility needs. So interesting here. We've actually, I think, made some progress on some of these goals. One is the public transit system. I know we have the Brazos. Is it the Brazos Transit Authority? Is that what it's called? Anybody know for sure? Can't remember the name of it. But the bus system, and in the last 20 years, we've also added. We always, I guess, had taxi cabs as an option, but now we have Uber and Lyft, even if they're not public options. They are alternatives to get around town for some people. But that is an area, I think, where we made some progress. But as one who doesn't utilize that system, I don't know if it is really sufficient or not. And then for expanded local air transportation options, I don't know if that's happened. Actually, I could tell you probably we have not happened or had an expansion of that, but there are some plans out at the airport to expand our capabilities out there. So perhaps that is in progress. Anybody have any thoughts about public transit or alternatives to getting around town, if as far as a goal goes? Is that something that we need to keep as a goal going forward? Go ahead, Sydney.
Land raised.
Yeah, go ahead, Sydney.
I mean, obviously, I think this probably needs a little more of an exploration of the resource for this, but or the cause of this. But the fact that we had 14 pedestrians killed last year seems like we're not doing something right when it comes to pedestrian safety. I mean, I don't think it's necessarily, I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's necessarily a sidewalk issue. I don't know what the issue is, but
Good question. Other cities of 30,000 people, I mean, what is it? What are their typical? That seems really high to me. Even though, you know, we have 30,000 people, it's a good question to say, is that atypical, or what's the factors behind that? Because I don't know, but I agree, it's troubling. Um, Go ahead, Kurt.
Oh, okay, Ken, thanks. It concerns me, Sydney, as well. Yeah, that's a horrible thing anytime someone's killed in an automobile pedestrian accident, and so definitely that needs to be considered and reviewed. But I would, along with that, there is a sometimes I hear people the sidewalk opponents, and it seems like maybe just our culture in general has taken a notion that the pedestrian, the idea that the pedestrian always has the right of way. That may be the case, and that's probably the courteous approach. But at the same time, when we're talking about different automobile thoroughfares, like for example an interstate, I haven't seen any interstates that have sidewalks on them. And I think the idea of trying to encourage people to pedestrian traffic on interstates or there's it's not a good idea, obviously, and so I don't know where the breaking point is. I think the idea that in a neighborhood, in a smaller street, it does have sidewalks or can have sidewalks. Yeah, that's a great place to encourage pedestrian traffic. But sometimes I think that the idea that the notion that pedestrian always has the right of way could be contributing to the question that City asks, and I just think that we need to be aware that in high traffic areas, that we might want to encourage from a cultural standpoint that maybe pedestrians need to be a little more cautious, and certainly drivers need to be cautious as well. Everybody needs to be cautious. But anyhow, that's my comment there.
Okay, thank you. I got Brad and then James.
Yeah, in some ways we may be a victim of trying to make sidewalks, which I agree with Kurt. I think we had good intentions making sidewalks on North Street, but you've also increased the pedestrian traffic, perhaps, and that causes people to not want to walk to the end of the block for a crosswalk, but just maybe try to weave in and out. I know they have done that at SFA for years, trying to get to Chili's and things. The other thing I've noticed, and maybe it's a COVID exclusive kind of thing, but people seem a little bit more edgy and angry these days, and they drive faster, and the mufflers are louder on North Street. I don't know. I live close to there, so I don't know what that's about. But my other concern is the more thoroughfares you make out of town, in this town here, the more traffic. In other words, say for instance, you widen a street, well, you're not going to have more bicycles and pedestrians on it. You're going to end up having more traffic combined with those trying to ride a bicycle and walk. I think if you would decide, well, I want this to be a more pedestrian oriented street, then you need to narrow that traffic down so they'll take a more free flowing way. And I think North Street is not the place to start. Say Mount Street, which I know well, if you didn't make it a thoroughfare, if people didn't go 50 miles an hour on it, you could have a bike lane and sidewalks and a pedestrian lane. And I think people would be very happy with that, homeowners and citizens.
Thank you. James, go ahead.
I'm coming from living on the south side of town, and recently we've had hit and runs. People that are handicapped trying to walk on the side of the road without a sidewalk, wheelchairs, crutches. It's, I mean, we put them in harm's way by not at least having a sidewalk where they can walk to and from their home to the store, to wherever they're going. And that concerns me quite a bit because we have, whether we like it or not, we're going to have that traffic coming in and out of town. And those individuals have to walk in the street to be able to get into town. So that's a big concern for me. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, so and I know that's the pedestrian thing is a hot button issue, because it's been a news story recently, but it's also troubling. Kathleen, I saw you put your hand back up.
Well, I don't know if it's for this committee or not, but I think the current number of deaths, pedestrian deaths, warrants being placed on the city council agenda now. And it's not just something that needs to be part of a comprehensive plan. And we need to ask for a report. So I intend to do that. So I thought I'd just warn you all.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, no, that's good to know. I'm sure you all were working on it. It's just, it's been a constant theme, it seems like, over the last couple of years, trying to make things more walkable, but then it seems like we're going backwards. So it's a good question why.
Right.
Can we move on to the next section? And while we're doing that, oh, Larry just put his hand down. Did you want to make a comment, Larry? Okay, we'll move on to the next section. If you want to chime in, feel free to put your hand back up. Can I do it? No, I can't. All right. Talking about utilities. This is as one of the older towns in Texas. Some say the oldest, and with some pretty old systems around. This is probably an area that is out of sight, but shouldn't be out of mind. So increased capabilities and capacity of the potable water system, increased capabilities and capacity of the stormwater collection and conveyance system, efficient and cost-effective use of treated water supplies, and increased capabilities and capacity of the wastewater system. And since, is Steve, are you still on?
Yes, I am. Yes,
All
I
right.
am.
Since we have the guy who's in charge of this, or who oversees the utility infrastructure, just could you speak real quickly to where we are now as far as capacity of our sewer and water system?
Sure, Ken. So there's two components to this. One is our ability to treat wastewater at the plant and to treat potable water at our facilities. In other words, what can we deliver from a plant standpoint versus what does our infrastructure, our lines, give us? So we have more than sufficient capacity remaining for a lot of growth at our surface water plant at the lake and also in our water well system. We have a lot of available capacity at our sewer plant. So our issues are strictly our piping and infrastructure to be able to deliver those services to new development or existing development. So the focus of these will be more on pipes, pipes and fixtures inside our city. This is normally a result of whatever land plan focusing the comp plan comes up with, and what the demands will be based on that land use plan. So this is kind of a natural reaction to whatever we show for desired land use. So I think that's kind of what this means. and obviously to be able to do things efficiently is included in that. And that could be a little bit of construction related improvements. But did that answer your question?
As far as including these as goals in a future plan, um, where do you see some of the and I'm asking you just because um, I'm aware anecdotally of issues, or I've had clients who come in and they're on a major thoroughfare, but for whatever reason they don't have a sewer line running accessible to their property. So I know there are issues around town that would affect future development and cost for developers and capacity. But what do you think are the biggest challenges or areas that need to be focused on going forward?
So again, I think there's two areas of answer to that, Ken. One is, are we going to proactively look at growing into new areas to develop new greenfields, new development footprints, kind of outside where we're currently developing? And if so, an I-69 corridor is probably the heart of that discussion. And so if so, then we need to look at extending new infrastructure to make those areas viable and developable. The other answer is we have a lot of overloaded systems right now. University Drive, downtown, we can pick it. So as we not only look at new land use, we probably need to look back and say our sewer lines are running at double capacity, and some of this just needs to be replaced, not only because of age, because it's undersized. So this study is not a detailed engineering analysis, folks, but it will help highlight our troubled areas and make some recommendations for some larger replacements that we ultimately turn into capital projects list. So, I mean, we'd like to see recommendations ultimately in the comp plan, and you've got hopefully engineers that are on staff of whoever we select as a consultant that will be helping us with that analysis. I think this is the 30,000 foot description of what they'll be doing in more detail. So I think we need to look proactively at utility extensions to open new areas up if that's what we want to do development wise. And then also proactively look at funding, replacing our very, very old infrastructure that's significantly undersized.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead, Kurt.
So with what Steve just said, Ken, it sounds like he gave us two bullet points to add to the four that are already there under utility infrastructure. One is obviously new development, and then two is how do we take care of the pipes that are the old pipes that are inadequate now. That's all. Steve said it a whole lot better than I could.
Yeah, I agree. And I think we should move on. Let's see. We've got, what sections haven't we covered? Community facilities, housing and neighborhoods. Though we have kind of talked a little bit about housing and neighborhoods. We already talked about Parks and Rec. And then there's historic preservation. Okay. I'll tell you what, why don't we move on to community facilities and services. Elena, if you can go over to that slide for me. Here we go. All right. So here we have 3 bullets. Police department that fulfills its mission and duties with adequate personnel, facilities, and service provision. Same thing with the fire department. And then an adequately staffed and housed public library, able to meet the high expectations of local patrons for a range of information services. So pretty simple there, but it's got 3 big areas and expensive, 2 of them at least are expensive areas for the budget. Any comments there? And go ahead, Kurt. You got your hand up.
Yeah, Ken. So thanks. I would like to say that I personally feel like that the Nacogdoches community has a superb and has two outstanding departments. The police department, I think, is wonderful, and I'll say the same thing about the fire department. I think both of those entities are outstanding, and so with that said, one of the things that I think is not addressed in this current plan is the idea of garbage collection. And for example, I think the citizens of Nacogdoches probably have an expectation that they're going to set their garbage out on the curb, and somebody's going to come along and pick it up and take it somewhere. And that's a reasonable expectation, but that's a service that's provided that it's clearly not addressed, or I haven't found it anywhere in this plan. And so I'll take that a little bit further, and I would think that a comprehensive plan of this nature would contemplate. I'm assuming that a lot of that winds up in our city landfill. And at the very least, I would think that the acreage of that facility, the age of it, and possibly the remaining capacity, at least ought to be mentioned in some type of a future plan that suggests that we're going to be okay in that department for another 20 years or 2 years or 50 years, whatever that may be. Because at some point the community is going to get to that limit, and probably don't need. I think 2 years would be a danger to approach. So and then that would further factor over into land use. If the current landfill is approaching a limit, which I have no idea where it's at, then the city's going to have to be looking somewhere else and allocating resources to for another landfill, or pay to have it shipped somewhere else, or at least it's going to have to be dealt with. So I'd like to see that as at least something that's considered here.
It's a good point. I hadn't thought of that at all, actually. Denise, go ahead.
When I was going through and reading the comprehensive plan, I kept coming up with which ones of these things have been done. And I mean, I think that would help us to know so that we know what we need to talk about. So if some of the firehouses have been fixed, I mean, I think there was some of that in there. And I mean, I don't know any of that stuff. So I think if someone could go through and kind of tell us these things have been done, then we won't have to, even talk about them. They're not even on the table anymore.
Yeah, and it's a good point too. And I think I don't know if it'll be next month or the meeting to follow. We are going to get into the weeds on some of the things that have actually been accomplished, or where we lack action or haven't accomplished certain goals. I think as far as the fire department goes, and I'll punt this over to Steve again with a maybe you can comment on Kurt's question about the landfill capacity, because that's something I hadn't thought about. But that plus fire department locations, I know that's something that's being considered, looking at where the population is and where some of our legacy facilities are, whether we need to either build new facilities or renovate old ones. Steve, do you have any comments on that?
Sure, and I'm unable to hear Kurt at this end of City Hall, so I apologize. I assume the question was about our current and future landfill capacity, Ken. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, just a short answer to that is we have over 20 years of capacity left with our current footprint, and we are working this year to begin a major permit amendment and it'll probably take a couple years to get that through the state, that we hope will increase us upwards of 40 years. So having this document support that need would be great. But that activity's underway, and that's kind of our goal, is to try to get hopefully 4 decades worth of capacity.
Okay. And then, as far as, well, I'll tell you what, since we're running long on time, we could talk about facilities at a future meeting, but that is something I think we need to go back into. And, it's one of the areas where the city can actually spend money in a neighborhood and go in and develop things, is when you're building a fire department, police station, and or supporting facilities. And so it's something we need to look at in the process. Brad, I saw your hand was up.
Just a little unclear. Is it our job to build in priorities for what we would wish to have be done first, second, third, fourth, and fifth? Or is it just general priorities all over the place?
Well, I think, as a steering committee, it would probably be helpful to rank what our priorities are, if possible, because if we just give a list of 15 things to as, hey, here's what we've talked about, to a consultant or whoever's trying to implement a plan or craft a new plan, seems to me like that wouldn't be as helpful as something that's ranked and said, here's our first priority, and so we better not ignore that one, even if it's hard.
I think
Yeah.
that sounds right.
Yeah. But yeah, that is, if we come up with it at the end of this process, we want to say, here's a document that kind of summarizes what we've decided as a group are our priorities. If we can, if possible, and it may be hard to do that, but I think it would be useful to have some ranking. The let's see, on I'll tell you what, we'll skip over to the housing and community, housing and neighborhoods, since there's a lot of points here. And let's see, what haven't we done yet, Elena? Since you've got the slides in front of you, I think we haven't done historic preservation.
Yes, historic preservation and the housing and neighborhoods chapter. And we also want to leave some time to let the committee
Wrap
ask
things
some
up.
questions about the FAQs.
Yes. So and we have already talked some about housing and neighborhoods for sure. I think that I don't want to spend too much time at this, because I do want to get into some of the other agenda items, but I do think we need to spend a little bit of time. Kathleen, I saw your hand was up.
I was just saying it's awfully late. I would rather not rush through things.
Yeah.
And slight them. I mean, that's my thoughts. And we're already seeing people kind of leave.
Drop off. Yeah.
Hey, Jen, I'm sorry, Kathleen. We can always continue the the discussion in the February meeting. We don't have to finish everything today.
Yeah, I think I would say let's come back to respect everybody's time, since we've been going at this for almost 2 hours now anyway. The sections we haven't addressed today, we can come back and hit those in February, if that's all right with everyone.
And perhaps we could have them, I mean, I know it's a lot of work, but numbered, and maybe even a little bit of what we don't need to address that we've accomplished. That might help us to then get more focused on, because on some of the areas, I'm thinking some of the things we did cover, we may not have actually added things that we want to make sure are in the plan too. Does that make sense? We may want to zip back and make sure that there aren't things we need to add in different sections, even if we've covered them just a little bit.
Yeah, and the intent was to kind of look and say, hey, what was bad about these goals, or what hasn't been fulfilled, or what is not necessary, and then what is good. But it's really hard to do that process without saying, well, here's something that needs to be considered.
Gotcha.
And I think, if we can keep running list of those things,
Right.
so that as we get on in this process, community meetings and other things, we can assess whether or not, we may talking on a Google meeting think it's important, but who knows, maybe the rest of the city is like, well, that's stupid. Why are you guys worried about that? And so, but I think we need to capture these things while we're talking about it, because otherwise, there's a
Absolutely.
lot here and we'll miss it.
Absolutely.
Thank you for that. So opening back up the agenda. So we have an FAQ document, that's number 3 on our agenda, which I guess city staff's put together regarding the process and what we're doing on the committee. So I'm going to turn it over to Elena. Are you going to give that?
Yeah, I'm just
Okay.
I'm sharing my screen again, and let me see. All right. Can everyone, hold on. Okay, so can everyone see my screen? This document
Yes.
that I pulled up? Okay. So we just wanted to take a little time to go over this with you guys. These are questions that city staff get asked a lot about this process. And so what we did is we compiled these questions that we get asked the most. And then we had city staff and some other partners provide answers to these and help us answer them in a way that everyone can understand, because we're aware that we deal with these plans every day, and we're involved in this process on a daily basis, but not everyone else is. And so we try to break it down into a way that everyone can understand, even if they weren't involved on day one. So our goal is to have these answers and make sure that everyone on our committee understands these answers and the process and how we got here. And if we need to tweak some of these, we can. And then we'll start putting this information out on our social media channels, sending it to Daily Sentinel, and making sure that everyone has a chance to know the background of the process and know where we're going. And because we know people are really busy, they have busy lives, and they've got a million things going on and a million different things that they can focus on, we wanted to make sure that everyone, again, just had the opportunity to get caught up with where we're at and understand where we're going. So the goal is to have you guys review these before we start putting them out into the community, because we don't want our steering committees to ever feel like they've been taken aback or that they don't know what we're putting out. So we want to make sure y'all reviewed them and that you guys understand all these things so that we can make sure the public understands them as well. And so if there's an answer to one of these that we've written and you're still thinking, I don't know what you're trying to tell me, or I don't understand this answer, please let us know so we can make sure that we've written it in a way that we're not skipping any steps essentially, and that it's easily digestible. And so we just wanted to get your feedback on these. And so if you have any questions, if there's something about one of our responses that bothers you, or you actually have a question that's not listed that you've already been asked, we'd like to make sure that we incorporate those. And so with that, I'll stop talking and see if any of the committee members have any questions about these questions and answers that we put together. And I see, Jacob, you've got a hand raised.
Yes, it's not a specific question regarding the FAQ, other than, will this be translated in Spanish?
Yes.
Okay.
Kurt, you have a question?
Yes, thank you, Elena. The question number 5 talks about the government accounting regulations are complex, or the answer says that the government accounting regulations are complex, but generally only money collected through utility bills can be used for utility construction. I know it's late in the hour, and I probably don't need to get into this discussion, but but I'm curious. So the maintenance of the pipes that Steve talked about earlier, our sewer pipes and outdated pipes and water pipes and so forth and so on, does that come strictly from the utility collections, or certainly there's other money in the budget to maintain those? I'm just curious. That seems a little restrictive to me.
Yeah, Steve, do you want to answer that? I can't.
Elena, you'll have to repeat it. We can't hear Kurt here at City Hall.
So Kurt's question was on question number 5, it goes into detail question number 5 is, why don't we spend the money budgeted for the comprehensive plan on badly needed water and sewer improvements instead? And the answer is that the plans that are proposed and the funding for those have to be taken out of the city's general fund, which can't be used for water and sewer improvements. And so generally with government accounting regulations, we're more restricted than private funding regulations. And so generally only money collected through utility bills like water and sewer bills can be used to fund those utility construction and repairs. In the Kurt's question was, that seems really restrictive. Are there no other funding mechanisms for those types of improvements?
Okay, in generally speaking, no, Kurt. So they're separate purses. In fact, it's called an enterprise fund. So our utility enterprise fund can, generally speaking, only be used on utilities. And I said it was a complex regulations because there are some minor exceptions to that. For example, that utility fund pays a part of my salary, and so there's some diversions that can go on, but no. And so that's why when we evaluate our capital needs for utilities, we have to look at what our specific utility revenue is and not our general ad valorem tax revenue, because we can't commingle those expenses or those funds. So yeah, it is that restrictive.
So are our rates too low to maintain what we have? Is that a fair conclusion? I just feel like I've got to be missing something here.
Steve, Kurt's comment was, is it an issue with our rates? Our rates aren't high enough in order to, accommodate that. And I think some of it is that we have a lot of aging infrastructure that we haven't adequately funded the maintenance of. And so, that stuff accumulates over time. And then you have a larger bill in order to pay, essentially, and as if you would have, provided additional maintenance in the interim. But Steve, do you want to expand upon that?
Well, and of course the answer can be kind of complex, but in general, we've deferred maintenance for a long time. In other words, we spent $1 million when we needed to spend $2 million, on infrastructure issues, because that's all we could afford at the time, Kurt. So yes, we've accumulated significant deterioration that has come home to roost. So our rates won't support the borrowing needed to do 100% of what we need to do, just as our tier 1 priorities. I think in round numbers, we're easily at 60 million of needs. And I know we just presented to Kathleen and to council all those capital needs, and there's more needs than there's funding, and more needs than ways we can fund it. But yes, correct. So some of that's from deferred maintenance. Some of it's from just general needs to grow the infrastructure based on capacity, and our rates have not necessarily kept up with those needs. So we will continue, and we're actually underway talking about doing a new water rate study right now, just to evaluate how we can do and handle those rates, and also address these new capital project needs.
All right, thank you, Steve. Kathleen, I saw your hand raised.
Larry's is raised first. I'm going to let
sorry. All right, go ahead, Larry.
And then I'll speak.
Okay.
No, actually, Kathleen's hand was up long before mine went up.
Well, okay. All I was going to say is, are you expecting us to approve this document or tonight? I would rather take time. And there's some things that I have concerns about within there, but this is very late in the evening to be going through that document and to say this is something that we approve of, or that we. Mm-hmm. I would suggest we have time to look at it and And it
Um,
approaches into other areas too. So it's
mhm.
not a,
Yeah, primarily we wanted to make sure that everyone understood the responses, and, ask if you had any concerns or you wanted clarification on these or thought that
I
they should
do have concerns, but I'd rather not at 5:28 start raising some of them. So maybe give us some time to look at them and.
Yeah, Ken, you want to go ahead?
Yeah, I was going to suggest giving everyone some sort of deadline to submit comments. Written comments would probably be more efficient since there's so many of us. And I know you probably would like to get this out before our next meeting just because of the questions you're getting. But I think if you could give the group a week or two to get comments back so we could address those before maybe before this is published to the city in general, that would be helpful.
Okay. Yeah, we can share this document with the group so they can edit it, make comments on it, submit those. We'll compile them, and then we can respond via email. So I think that, and then we can go from there.
Go ahead, Larry.
Yeah, I wanted to clarify. I want to understand when we say government accounting regulations on number 5, that is government accounting regulations at what level? Federal, state, local?
So the city follows state, generally state administrative code, and they control the way we look at funds and how we manage money in a city. And so
the state,
that's what that's implying, that there are government accounting regulations. A lot of those are state regulations, and I'm sure there's some federal fingers in there somewhere.
so the state,
But they do control the way we handle our funds and manage our money to protect you in the public.
understand. So the state administrative code says that you can't use the general fund money for utility improvement.
That's generally correct. Yes.
That doesn't really allay my question, but anyway.
Do we need to have a session where we just talk about government accounting and how funding is supposed to work at a state level?
I think we can provide, when we send out a copy of the document, we can provide some additional information and clarification on that for the group to read. And then if they have any questions, they can reach out directly to me or Steve, and then we can share those responses to the group as well. So that way there's some better shared understanding.
Okay. Yeah, and you might be surprised at what you find when you look in the state administrative code and other codes as to what requirements can be in there, not just for accounting, but for example, I think every contract the city does, don't we have to say, doesn't the person have to pledge that they're not going to boycott Israel? Isn't that's a state law? I don't know why it matters in Nacogdoches, but politics create some weird requirements at times. So if you would, when you send that out, Elena, just give us a hard deadline on when we need to have comments in that. I would say at least a week would be helpful. And then that'll give everybody a chance to fully review it. Do you want to move ahead and talk about the schedule for the future meetings?
Sure. So our next meeting is scheduled for February 10th. We hope that meeting is in person. We'll continue to monitor our local COVID rates and make sure that that it's if there are continued high rates, we'll evaluate that at that time. But we do anticipate that we will start seeing a reduction, and so we'll keep the group up to date on whether or not that meeting is going to be virtual or in person. At that meeting, we'll finish the discussion on the different goals and objectives of the different elements of the land use plan. And we also plan to provide a presentation on implementation status of the plan. So looking at the different implementation recommendations and actually providing kind of like a scoring sheet of what's been implemented and what hasn't, why or why not. And we'll provide that for the group at that meeting.
Okay, great. Any other comments before we adjourn? If not, thank you very much for sticking around, everybody. I appreciate your comments today and the time that you spent reviewing the current plan, and look forward to our next meeting. Hopefully it's in person. But thank you all very much for your time.